Coming up with game mechanics is one of the most important responsibilities of a game designer, as they are essentially the game's soul. There are different methodologies to come up with these mechanics. In this video, I want to talk about the different ways of coming up with good game mechanics and to provide you with some tips that might help you out in the process of creating them. First of all, I wanted to differentiate and explain this concept because I don't want people to be confusing game mechanics and game ideas. While they are related to each other, they are two very different things. A game idea is just that, an idea that you might have for a specific game that you want to create. For example, the idea for a game like Portal was that the player can create portals to enter and exit rooms in any way the player wants. This is just an idea, as it is very broad and can be achieved in very different ways depending how the game designer wants to accomplish this in their game. Now for a mechanic, we have to really think in more specifics about how the game is going to behave and what the rules will be for it to work. In that same portal example I mentioned, they could have changed the types of portals that you can create, maybe adding a third one that maybe flips the room, or they could have changed the amount of portals that you can make at a time. However, they decided that the way the mechanic is going to work was by having only two portals, the start portal and the end portal, distinguished by colors. If you fire another one of any of the portal types, it will replace the one you just fired. How did they figure that out? They went through some playtesting and iterated on the game to make sure that the game mechanic felt fun and engaging. Most importantly, they focused on how it could be expanded upon, as those are always the best game mechanics. With that distinction out of the way, now let's look at ways in which you can come up with game mechanics for your game. The best and most important advice here is to think about the player experience that you want to create for your game. This is very important because each game has its own player experience goal the designer wants to achieve. It is super important for you to think about this if you want your game mechanics to be good. Say for example, if your game's player experience is to make the player feel accomplished, then you can narrow your game mechanics that way. What do I mean by that? Instead of thinking about a broader set of mechanics for your game, you can just worry about thinking in terms of mechanics that might make the player feel accomplished. This can vary, and you might have other ideas, but you can make a game similar to Dark Souls, in which the game is really punishing but in a rewarding way. The way you feel rewarded as a player is when you finally beat it. Another player experience you might want to play with is to make the player feel wonder and excitement as they are exploring a world. In this case, you might want to consider mechanics that allow you to traverse a world. These, combined with solving interesting puzzles that give the player agency in what they're doing, will help them keep them engaged. A good example of this type of game is Outer Wilds. In that game, you as a player are not given any direction, and the world, or worlds I should say, are just waiting for you to be explored. Another thing that you can do to come up with good game mechanics is to play other games. This might be really obvious, but it is very important. When you are playing any game, try to think about what the game makes you feel and why. And I'm not talking about the story, but more about how it plays out. You might feel rage, excitement, or even fear. Try to make a list of what games make you feel, and try to think why that happened. There might be a specific mechanic in that game that makes you feel a certain way. There might also be times when you're playing games and you think that a mechanic is not aligning with the player experience, or that it can be improved in certain aspects. When you notice that, make a note, because those are things that you can incorporate into your game to mix and match game mechanics that you like. An example of my experience with this is a mechanic that I hated in the game Days Gone. In that game, the player experience is all about scraping for resources and trying to survive in a world filled by zombies in which danger lurks at every corner. The main and only method of transportation is your bike. There is a mechanic around that bike that is meant to make you feel insecure and unsafe all the time. Your bike has health, and you need to find parts to repair it if it fails or if you crash it. You also need to find gas in order to be able to use it. This on paper sounds great, as it seems fun to be looking for resources and taking the risk of finding a hearth, but being rewarded with resources if you end up surviving. However, being the main way of transportation in this game, this mechanic gets really annoying very fast. If you're in the forest and hit a tree by accident, then your bike takes damage. Or say you are in the middle of a forest and your bike fuel runs out, then you need to walk. I would have preferred to be able to scavenge for other ways of transportation or not having to worry about the bike being damaged at all, as for me it discourages its use. Another thing that you can do to come up with game mechanics is combining two or more game mechanics that you like. This can be a great exercise as it can help you come up with unique mechanics that come with your own twist. One good example of this is The Binding of Isaac. In that game, most of the mechanics come from games like the original Legend of Zelda. However, they combine those with making the levels procedural, getting power-ups in each room and also having permadeath as a mechanic, in which if you die, the game starts over again from the beginning and you lose everything. I've mentioned this before, but don't underestimate taking inspiration from other mediums, such as movies, books, or even board games. This can be really a great resource and can also lead to creating new genres of games. The best example of this probably is the creation of the Battle Royale genre a couple of years ago. They essentially took the game mechanics of a game like Call of Duty or any other shooter and combined it with the book and movie Hunger Games. That resulted in the arena where the circle gets smaller and smaller as players are killed, until only one person survives. Nowadays, we see this in almost every VR game like Fortnite, Apex Legends, and PUBG. As you can see, there are a lot of ways of coming up with game mechanics. However, if there is one thing you should take from this video, is that the most important thing is to define your player experience goal and define your mechanics. That will help guide the design of the game, and you will have an easier time when you're playtesting your game and trying to see what game mechanics are working and which ones are not. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Which ways do you use to come up with game mechanics? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. See you next time!